I'm glad to take the opportunity to talk about really the very heart of our faith, the Eucharist. We talk about it a lot, but we need to, because faith that what happens at every Mass, in whatever language, in whatever form, I believe there are 22 different rites in the Catholic Church. That number may not be specifically right, but there are many rites. And I think we need to remember that richness through the ages. I know for myself, I'm not very familiar at all with the Eastern liturgies, but I've really been intrigued and really drawn in by those different liturgies that come from Eastern nations, and just through the history of the Church. They are remarkably similar, and I think that's one thing to remember, that when we approach the Eucharistic altar, the sacrificial altar of Jesus Christ, in whatever form, whatever language, whatever culture we're bringing to it, the components are the same as you can read St. Justin Martyr. I've always been inspired by his writings early in the 2nd century, from what I understand. And he describes the basic components. Anyone who is familiar with the Catholic Mass in whatever form is going to say, he's talking about the Mass. He talks about the people gathering, reading from the memoirs of the apostles, reflecting on those, and then bringing bread and wine to the table, offering up prayers. It's just beautiful, and that goes back so many centuries. And I think with all the controversies and the divisions in the Church that keep percolating, the idea of remembering the very heart of the Mass, of course, and we all know this, but I think our practice and our approach to each other and to the various forms of the liturgy, we always have to remember that the heart of the Mass is Jesus Christ. I encourage people, to priests or laity, deacons, bishops, to look to those liturgies that really feed their heart. I guess one way of saying it is, what form of the liturgy connects your heart to the Sacred Heart of Christ most deeply? As long as it is a valid Mass, which at the very core of it has bread and wine prayed over in the words of Christ Himself. The words of consecration are the same, translated from different languages, but they're the same in all the Masses. And I think that echoes the idea that Jesus Christ, His Sacred Heart, is the heart of the Mass. And I think that's so essential for us to remind ourselves of. I need to remind myself. We all need to remember. And hopefully that helps us when friends or even family are saying, this form of the Mass is really connecting my heart to the Sacred Heart of Christ. And we're saying, I don't understand, or I don't understand this liturgy or this form of the Mass. I think we can, if we remember that our parents or our younger children or whoever it is that maybe is gravitating to a Mass that isn't comfortable for us, to remember and to discuss with them, is it taking you closer to the Sacred Heart of Christ? If that is happening, and it's a valid liturgy, then what a beautiful blessing. If I know in my experience, I don't speak a lot of languages, English and Spanish, and still working on Spanish, but I love the Spanish liturgy just because the Spanish language is beautiful, and there are some elements there that are basically the same, but in the Spanish culture and the Spanish expression are beautiful. Like if you've ever been to a traditional Spanish wedding, there's some elements there like the arras and the lasso If you're intrigued by that, just check it out. What are those? But those are elements of a specific ritual of a different Mass. It's a Novus Ordo Mass that I've been to, but I'm sure in the Latin Mass also there would be some of those elements in traditional Spanish cultures. But that richness there, and all of it should and does, if we pay attention, if we really operate correctly, all of it is pointing to the heart of the Mass, to the Sacred Heart of Christ. Many Eucharistic miracles tell us, approved miracles that the Church says this, it seems to be an authentic miracle. Very often it's dealing with heart tissue, and I think that tells us so much. Certainly the Eucharist is the fullness of Christ, body and blood, soul and divinity. But He gives us His Sacred Heart and wants to connect to our heart. So I'd encourage all of us as we begin a new year to really resolve to look to Christ in the heart of the Mass and to approach whatever form of the Mass we attend, to approach the Mass preparing to meet the Sacred Heart of Christ in the Eucharist. And then, beyond imagining, a whole other talk for me would be receiving Him into our bodies, receiving His body and blood, soul and divinity. So let us resolve to really appreciate the wonder we have in the Mass of the Catholic Church.